Good evening, Bahamas. Coming up tonight on our news.
PLP leader Brave Davis slams the Prime Minister's recent comments about the appointment of a Chief Justice.
Our news is brought to you by Alive.
Welcome to our news and thanks for joining us. I'm Christina Dragovich. Topping news tonight, the Ministry of Education has delivered on its promise to fire delinquent contract workers. This exercise comes nearly 2 months after Minister of Education Jeffrey Lloyd said some 200 workers were either not performing up to standard or not showing up to work at all. Jillian Gray reports.
Over a month after revealing that 200 Ministry of Education workers were delinquent in their duties, Minister of Education Jeffrey Lloyd says his ministry is delivering on the promise of taking disciplinary action.
I am happy to report that the disciplining process is underway, and there have been some terminations and there will be more, and there will be further disciplining of those who we think warranted. Listen, it is the intention of our ministry to engage as many persons who are suitably qualified and are interested and are capable and who wish to be a part of this revolution in education that is now presently underway, right? But there are obligations that they have to fulfill. First of all, they've got to come to work. And when they do come to work, they must come to work on time and they must do their jobs.
Those 200 persons are mainly contract workers whose agreements expired last June. The education minister says many of them have not turned up for work or have failed to perform. While he could not say how many of those delinquent workers were fired, Lloyd noted that the Ministry of Education has finally followed through on its promise to take disciplinary action. That means either being fired or suspended.
A couple of dozens, yes, but that process continues. And it's across the system. I mean the Ministry of Education system, because these contract workers, you know, in the Security Department, General Services Department, and elsewhere.
Hammering on the fact that many of the workers were still being paid even though they were not showing up for work, Lloyd said the decision was made to fire them to ensure that taxpayers get value for their money. In some instances, he says, workers did not show up for work for 50 to 100 days.
Letters of warning, obviously, certain suspensions. It could also require that they submit to certain behavioral corrections. And we also, may require that some of these persons who we see have the talent and ability, and for other reasons, may deserve another chance by way of some more training and so on.
Last year, the Ministry of Education required contract workers to take part in a training session. However, he says some of them did not pass the course, while others simply failed to show up. Lloyd says the actions being taken now are reasonable.
The exercise that is underway now is an exercise of fairness and equality.
Reporting for our news, I'm Jillian Gray.
Opposition leader Philip Davis is firing back at Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis over his assertion that he will not be forced to do anything when it comes to appointing a substantive Chief Justice. Davis says the Prime Minister's statements are not only childish, but also prove Dr. Minnis does not know what he's doing and is placing the country on the path to disaster. Jasmine Brown has that.
Davis says no one is trying to force the Prime Minister to do anything except carry out his duties, as he called the Prime Minister's comments yesterday childish.
My frightening concern of the depth and competence of the Prime Minister, which is exemplified in his response to questions relating to the appointment of the Chief Justice.
Minnis has been repeatedly criticized for failing to name a substantive Chief Justice and going on the defensive when questioned by reporters on the matter. Prominent members of the legal fraternity, including the Bahamas Bar Association president and even the Minister of State for Legal Affairs, have called on Minnis to name a substantive CJ, warning the delay puts the country in an existential and constitutional crisis. Senior Justice Stephen Isaacs has been acting for 4 months. When pressed on the issue recently, Minnis first said he needed to go home to make stew fish, then later stated appointing a CJ was not as important to him as dealing with the BPL union's blackout threat. Then on Monday, the PM said no one will force him to do anything.
The comment is puerile, to say the least. It's not a question of forcing him to do anything. it is his duty to make an appointment. The absence of the appointment is causing concern in the community, and in particular, the legal fraternity.
Davis says the PM's failure to act is a threat to democracy. He called on all right-thinking Bahamians to push back and force ministers to seek advice on an issue Davis says he clearly has no knowledge of.
The one thing I know is that I know that I do not know. And I think it is good that I know that I do not know. But what about him? Who thinks he knows, but he doesn't know that he knows. And that is where we seem to be today with our Prime Minister. The knowledge is out there for him to have. But unless and until he recognizes he doesn't know and needs to get to know, and tap into those people who knows to be able to advise him, we are headed to a disaster.
The Governor General appoints the Chief Justice on the recommendation of the Prime Minister after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition. Davis says he awaits the Prime Minister's call so that they can get on with the consultation process. When asked if he would support current Attorney General Carl Bethel being appointed to the CJ post amid speculation, Davis said no way.
I will not support the appointment of anyone to the post of Chief Justice directly from the boiler room of politics.
Bar Association President Khalil Parker has said he is viscerally opposed to Carl Bethel becoming Chief Justice. Reporting for our News, I'm Jasmine Brown.
In other news, after more than 200 nurses on several islands called in sick yesterday, those nurses were said to be back to work today. Giorgio Bain reports.
The minister says he finds it peculiar that 200 people would get sick in the absence of some public health issues, but it's premature to say whether those nurses will face any disciplinary action. According to Sands, he's just happy to have those nurses back to work today.
Yes, they are. They're at Princess Margaret Hospital. We would have had a total of 5 people call in thus far, but that is probably not anything other than the usual. So it appears as if the nurses are no longer ill.
In addition to a meeting set for May 4th, Sands says his ministry has been actively working to resolve issues raised by the Bahamas Nurses Union. They include money owed for mileage, a pay increase, better insurance coverage, an increase in on-call allowance for Family Island nurses, and money owed to some nurses.
We employed the help of the Director of Labor. We would have seen to it that some $55,000 of outstanding mileage accrual for a group of nurses was placed on the pay sheet, and the expectation was that they should have had that money in their accounts last payday. We now need to confirm whether those instructions from Health were carried out by Finance and Treasury. But certainly if it was not on the pay sheet in April, I am advised that it will definitely be on the pay sheet in May.
There is also the issue of a shift system, which Sands says the Public Hospital Authority had not even implemented. He called the entire situation, which forced many clinics to turn away patients, unfortunate.
The matter of the 4-on, 4-off, the Public Hospital Authority had not implemented the change in shift system. And so to disadvantage the public on the basis of a conversation, to me is unfortunate.
Senior nurses and expatriate nurses and student nurses stepped up in response to Monday's alleged sick-out. However, the Minister of Health says unions' ability to use industrial action as a tool needs to be addressed. In the meantime, he says he's open to having a discussion with the nurses' union.
There's an obligatory tension that while the union may want a particular benefit for its membership, it doesn't necessarily mean that the people of the Bahamas or the government of the Bahamas has to capitulate to every single demand. We understand that demands can be reasonable, but some demands can be unreasonable or the timeline is not appropriate.
Reporting for our News, I'm Georgie O'Bain.
Well, the opposition has accused the health minister of mishandling ongoing talks with nurses, prompting more than 200 of them to call in sick yesterday.
The Minister of Health, Dr. Dwayne Stearns, continues his penchant for describing the problems with the healthcare delivery system. You know, as a doctor, he's very good at descriptions, but he's failing to give prescriptions.
Davis says if the administration is serious about resolving the nurses' issues, it must be proactive in its approach.
The political directorate has to be more responsive to the concerns of the nurses and take the politics out of their approach to resolving their issues.
The National Security Minister is seeking to get communities involved in the fight against crime. The Prime Minister last night launching the country's first ever National Neighborhood Watch Program and Council. Kyle Joaquin has that.
Government officials call it a campaign promise fulfilled.
Tonight, with the overwhelming support of numerous stakeholders, we are now delivering on this promise.
The Minnis administration launched its National Neighborhood Watch program, which is designed to eventually have a crime watch group in every community.
Always remember that you are not police officers. As you conduct your community patrols, we do not expect you to engage suspects.
Instead, Minnis said he wants those volunteers to know that they are only to alert law enforcement of criminal or suspicious activity in the area. Senior Assistant Commissioner of Police Stephen Dean heads the program and has a team of police officers in various districts with neighborhood crime watch teams already established. It's something National Security Minister Marvin Dame said he wanted to see happen a long time ago.
This is what policing is all about. It's a partnership, and any successful policing department relies heavily on the support of the community.
Just last week, James reported that crime nationally was down 14%, with a 36% decrease in murders. He said obviously there are communities where police will target by setting up neighborhood watch teams.
We have any number of plans to push technology as well. You would have heard the introduction of CCTVs in some of these communities. Communications, a room will be established in any number of these police stations that will allow for connectivity between the station and the respective communities.
Overall, the National Security Minister says it's a program for the people to get involved in, with the hopes of seeing less house breakings, robberies, and crime overall.
So we're all, me along with my colleagues in the cabinet, are working as a team to certainly create that atmosphere whereby we can have peaceful communities and by extension a peaceful and safe nation.
For our news, I'm Kyle Joaquin.
Well, the survey of 11 unregulated communities on New Providence is complete. Chairman of the Shantytown Committee, Dion Folk, says the process was a smooth one.
We have supplied the information to the Department of Statistics, and they are in the process of compiling the information. Hopefully we'll have a report for you maybe next week, Wednesday, because I want to present the results to Cabinet first, and we do intend to make it public.
The committee is looking at beginning the survey of the Mud and the Pigeon Pea communities in Abaco by mid-May. The survey began in late March, and Folk says he thinks it was completed fairly quickly. He thanked several church groups and organizations, including the Haitian Bahamian League of Pastors, Rights Bahamas, and the United Bahamian Haitian Association for their help during the process.
Our next step is to do some public meetings, especially in the Carmichael Road area. We intend to have 2 town hall meetings. One in the shanty towns themselves and another one for the subdivisions around the shanty towns. So we can tell everybody exactly what our timetable is, what the notice period is in terms of for the residents to move. And we're also having a meeting with all of the leaseholders of the land of the shanty towns, and they're all Bahamians.
Shantytown landowners will be notified of the time period and can take legal action if needed. The government, however, has not given notice of eviction just yet.
That's a legal requirement that's done by the Attorney General's office and the Ministry of Works. But there are certain time periods that have to be given, and those notices will be given by those two authorities.
Still to come on our news, the Progressive Liberal Party slams uncertainty over the O-Band deal. Plus, carnival bands ready for the road. That's coming up when our news returns.